boy, everybody knew what a downwinder was. We were the anti-nuclear capital of the world. I was an autistic kid. My father was a drafted United States Marine, an incredible man. I come from an incredible family. My uncle stood on Omaha Beach on D-Day. I grew up on a huge ranch out by the lake. He was a beautiful, incredible person. He was at Pendleton, combat ready, and they were human guinea pig. They were marched into the trenches in Nevada. They're called atomic veterans. He nearly died at the blast. Between 1951 and 1968, we had 300 open-air tests. Well, as different scientists started to write about this, Wallace Stegner was at the University of Utah at the time. I got to know him. Edward Abbey was hanging around there. I got to know him. I got to know all these environmentalists, and I was an environmentalist, and it was a passionate, intense subject matter there.
All nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. All nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. They'll be calling you a radical. Plumegate, 311, whatever you want to call it. I call it Pacific genocide, whatever. It's fucking giant conspiratorial across all demographics. All nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. They'll be calling you a radical. All nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. Plumegate, 311, whatever you want to call it. I call it Pacific genocide, whatever. It's fucking giant conspiratorial across all demographics. They'll be calling you a radical. May God have mercy on all of your souls.
Nuclear power was evolving. We were promised, oh, this can't happen.
Hey, UCY radio listeners, this is Lonnie Clark again. I'm filling in for Kevin Blanche. I hope you're having a good week. There's a few things I want to discuss with you. First, let me tell you that on Thursday, I will be interviewing one of the primary supporters of the Post-Ignorance Project, Patrick McCormick. He's an artist and a writer, and he is going to be coming on and talking about his experience with the Post-Ignorance Project. So I'm looking forward to that this coming Thursday. We'll spend a little bit of time talking with him. Also, I wanted to talk to you about this attitude. I don't know about if any of you have this, but I have this feeling lately that we're just sort of pissing in the wind. That whatever it is we're doing and however strong we're going, it does not seem to be working. And the ironic part about that is this is exactly how batterers work. Batterers want us to believe that we cannot do anything for ourselves and that every action we take is going to be useless. You know, the way I view this, I mean, so many people come to me and say, why do you keep doing this? Like, why are you invested? And this is how I see it. We have two choices. We can be cowards or we cannot be cowards. And I personally choose not to be a coward. We are facing an immense, probably the biggest thing we've ever faced in the history of humanity. Fukushima is going on now. I'm almost stunned to say it, but it's been pouring radiation into the air, into the water, into everything near it for almost 5 years. In February, it'll be, in March 11th, it'll be 5 years. And I was looking up how many anti-nuclear groups are there, because I know one of the things, like I often go to Dana Durnford's Beautiful Girl by Dana, his live web feeds, so that I can feel like there's a sense of community, because there's so few of us, quote, so few of us out there talking about anti-nuclear issues and the truth about the harm that nuclear radiation causes. And really the lack of responsibility, the complete disregard for human life and all life on our planet, and the willingness of the paid marine biologists to just do as they're told, keep their trap shut, and don't mention the radiation. Don't test for it. Don't look for it. Don't discuss it. Believe what the Department of Energy is telling us. In the face of unmitigated evidence that radiation is causing these catastrophic deaths in the Pacific. Kevin deemed it the Pacific genocide, and boy, was he right. That is absolutely right. You know, I was looking on ENE News yesterday, and they had this article on there about Dr. Vera Trainer said all the signs are pointing to this really unusual event that is very widespread. And it just fucking blows me away. I sent her an email this morning. I went on to the NOAA website and told her we really need them to break ranks. We need them to start testing and put science back in science. Because Dr. John Goffman, Dr. Arthur Tamplin, their work has really been suppressed. And I actually had a student at the University of Oregon tell me that his work was, what was the word he used? Discredited, that he's no longer considered, a viable source. Really? Because he gave the Atomic Energy Commission the wrong answers? That there is no hormesis? This is their big thing. You'll hear that word now very frequently, probably. It's hormesis is meaning that when you come across a toxin, your body begins to adjust to it, and you can it starts to be beneficial to your body. So hormesis is being able to take in radiation and have it actually make us stronger, bigger, better humans. And I don't know about you, but if you consider having 10-year-old children die from cancer, or children born with 7 fingers or an extra limb, a bigger, better, stronger human, maybe that's what that means. Or skin that doesn't really show up when the baby's born. I thought that what I would do with Dr. Vera Trainer is ask everybody to either send her an email. You can find her. It's Trainer on the NOAA website. All you have to type in is Vera Trainer, NOAA, in the Googles, and you'll find her page. Her page will pop right up. That's how I found it, and I sent her an email. Her phone number, if you want to give her a call, is 206-860-6788. And let me give you that number again. It's 206-860-6788. I mean, this is my feeling. We are seeing an unprecedented amount of death going on right now in the Pacific Ocean. We knew it was coming. 4 years ago, they said, it's going to take the radiation 4 years to find its way to the West Coast. Now that it's here, they're calling it a toxic bloom or algae bloom. I mean, it's the fucking twisting like a pretzel is just, it is meant to dishearten those of us who have actually been paying attention. It's a complete mind fuck. And the only way that we can actually push through this is to be determined that we're not going to back off or back down or give up. Because every single nuclear radiation plant in our country is falling apart. There is not one that's in good condition. Not one. I was reading an article this morning on the Hill. And our senators are actually trying to figure out ways, as you know, to bring radiation, that's what I call it, nuclear energy to our states. And in Illinois in particular, Illinois has 4 nuclear power plants whose licenses are about to be expired. And our senators there are trying to figure out ways to extend those licenses. I don't get these elected officials. They think that they can just pass a legislative wand over these nuclear power plants, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're going to be working and functionally correct. That has nothing to do with the fact that the nuclear energy industry rips us off and puts in the cheapest shit they possibly could put in. They don't warn anybody about the danger of radiation. In Europe, when they do their annual checkups, and they have to replace parts and they have to open the vents, that's where most of the radiation comes out in that one little tiny 24-hour period. They basically send out notices to the towns surrounding them, telling them, please stay inside for the next week. We have to do maintenance. It's going to be higher than usual levels of radiation. In the United States, we are not warned at all. There is no communication whatsoever. All we get in the United States is the usual, no harm to public health. They open them up, and then they aggregate the amount of radiation throughout the whole year, and that's how they tell you how radioactive it is in that area, which is really, again, a complete mind fuck. The way they disregard human life, the way our elected officials have a complete disregard for human life is beyond comprehension. I get it that most of them are millionaires and they think that because they are super rich, they're above the law and they're above the negative effects of radiation. But as we saw with Beau Biden, nobody is safe. And I have to say, I am still blown away that Vice President Joe Biden is not now spouting out about we need to slow the train down on nuclear power plants in this country. This whole thing of we've got the Pacific Ocean is warming, so now we've got an algae bloom. And so instead of saying, how did we get the algae bloom, which is obviously is an algae bloom, but how did we get there? It's not just an algae bloom, it's a radiation plume. It's from radiation. And the complete denial up the food chain of everybody who is supposed to pay attention, every single person that we're supposed to trust on this issue is intentionally lying or just a complete dumb fuck and buys the complete propaganda from the nuclear cartel. What did my friend Ed say? A teaspoon of propaganda makes the radiation go down. These bullshit people, like, we really have got to start calling them. I don't know how many people actually, I really have no idea how many people actually listen to this radio show, but I hope we can get every single one of you to call your elected officials and tell them that we want to have the Pacific Ocean test. Although this is the bullshit. We can demand that they test, and then what? We're going to get tests that say, don't worry, there's no radiation. They just expand the limits. They make their levels way too broad. They skew the science so that they get the results that they want. And that is not science. That's just a complete mindfuck. It's actually, I know that they think that they're going to make a lot of money doing this. And frankly, they are. They're becoming billionaires, gazillionaires, while the rest of the planet is literally being destroyed. What's going on in the Pacific Ocean? Those poor children. I about had a heart attack last week when I saw all those little tiny red baby crabs up on Newport Beach, frankly, out by my home. And I was dumbfounded to watch those people allow their children to touch those crabs. Those kids in 5 to 10 years, if they touch those crabs, put their hand to their mouth, they're going to end up with cancer 3 to 5 years from now, if not faster. They're sitting on the West Coast constantly exposed to radiation. And this is the real fucking shock about it all. People want to act like if they don't think about it, if they don't talk about it, if they pretend it's not real, then they are going to be excluded. And then when they do get cancer, or something does go wrong, they get diabetes or they have a heart attack, and someone says, wow, that's probably from your exposure to radiation from Fukushima, they're like, no, it's because I smoke cigarettes, or no, it's not because of that. The complete, brainwashing. We're living in a time where people are just fogged over on reality in this country. And I can only say this country because I'm not here. I only live here and I have not gone abroad. Kevin's over in Austria. He says over there they are extremely anti-nuclear, that nobody wants it. There's a huge movement over there and people there are very, very aware. And like I told you earlier, at least in those countries, they are warned when their nuclear power plants are switched over. Like they are told when there is maintenance going on so that they can protect themselves. So I don't know how that looks on the oncology rates, and perhaps that's another project that I'll do is I'll start looking and seeing at the oncology rates. I do know that last night I did look up The very first nuclear meltdown that we had in the United States was right in Simi Valley in California. It was run, I think it was by called Teledyne, and it was a nuclear facility that had a one-third core meltdown, and they basically did not tell anybody about it. We didn't even. My friend Ed grew up in Van Nuys, and when I first got involved with Fukushima, he started looking up nuclear meltdowns all over the place, and he discovered this. Both his parents and his family died. His sister, his brother, his mom, his dad all died from cancer. And there was no cancer ever in their history. Just like most of us. Most of us have not had cancer in our history. Most of our family members have never had cancer. Up until the 50s, when cancer took off and the cancer industry got a win-win. Let's give them electrical power. Let's destroy their food supply. I mean, these, really seriously, these capitalists that came around after the turn of the century and the last century are probably the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. In fact, probably ever happened to our planet. They have no regard for life. So back to Chatsworth. So what happened was out in Simi Valley, there's a nuclear meltdown. And, I was looking up, what are the rates, the oncology rates? The rates there are off the chart with cancer. Off the charts in Simi Valley, around Chatsworth, Moore Park, all around that whole area, 50-mile radius as a matter of a fact. The children have a more higher than normal cancer rate. And there are organizations that have sprung up, and the light bulb went off. So then that led me to another question. How many anti-nuclear groups are there going on? Because I know one of the things that I think about very regularly is, I go to I go to that live chat with Dana Durnford on YouTube to kind of chat with other people about this, because people in my personal life don't want to talk about it. So I went into the Googles and I could not actually believe it. There are hundreds, and you know how many people this equates to? Just in the United States, there are so many anti-nuclear groups. So this is my question, how is it that we can't get all these people to come together to be a unifying force? And why aren't all of these people talking about fucking Fukushima and plugging up those goddamn holes and figuring it out, or at least warning everybody? I mean, nobody really talks out. Nobody protests. Nobody speaks out. I mean, do we hear from Beyond Nuclear anymore? Excuse me. Are they on the radio at all? I mean, the list is incomprehensible. It starts from A, goes all the way A to W. Abalone Alliance, Arms Control Association, Australian Conservation Foundation, Bologna Foundation, Beyond Nuclear, Campaign Against Nuclear Energy, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament in New Zealand, Canadian Coalition for Nuclear Responsibility, Nuclear Peace Foundation, Nuclear Control Institute, Nuclear Disarmament Party. Now, who's the Nuclear Disarmament Party? That'd be an interesting thing. Where are these people? Why is it that we feel like there's only a few hundred people actively engaged in stopping the nuclear cartel? I mean, we have to be super diligent in our own backyards against legislation, and that's where I think it is. I really think we really have to be diligent about the legislation. I go to the Hill regularly, and I was dumbfounded this morning when they are introducing legislation. This morning I read that Maine Governor Paul LePage, he's a Republican, introduced a bill this session that would have removed a state requirement that a new nuclear plant generating power fewer than 500 megawatts of electricity go through a public referendum. So you know what that means? See, right now, like in Oregon, this is why they're declaring a state of emergency in Oregon, because in Oregon we passed a law that says we do not want nuclear power and it's illegal. So in order for them to build these little tiny nuclear modular plants, they have to declare a state of emergency. In this case, we're getting the governor to introduce a bill that says anything that produces a small level of megawatts has to have a public referendum, which means that they can just start building them at will. Indiana State Representative he's a state senator, Jim Merritt, he's a Republican, has pushed to create the regulatory framework necessary to bring nuclear to his state. With forthcoming Environmental Protection Agency rules on nuclear power plant carbon emissions, I beg your pardon, he said the state's utility would have to move towards nuclear. Our fucking government is moving towards nuclear when Fukushima has not been resolved 4 years later. Do you guys get that? This is like, not only if Fukushima was not urgent enough, these dumb fucks in our country are rushing, pushing us off fucking Niagara Falls in a barrel with our hands tied behind our back. And the massive people are refusing to get actively engaged, even at an administrative level, to stop these bastards from putting more nuclear power on our planet. It is incomprehensible. What is it going to take? What does it take? If anybody has any really good ideas on what it's going to take, please, it's like fucking throwing spaghetti against the wall. We're trying to figure out what the fuck works. Evidently, nothing so far is working. These goddamn guys, they're rushing towards more nuclear. They're seeing the climate change and expand. Not one bit of conversation about how Fukushima has changed our atmosphere, how Fukushima has changed the Pacific Ocean, how Fukushima is harming our breathing air. Fukushima is going on there. All you have to do is look at the feeds on the TEPCO website. Gas is exploding. That's not just gas, that's nuclear pollution. It gets into your body, it gets into your blood, it gets into your food supply, it gets into everything. And our elected officials are rushing towards nuclear. They must have swallowed the Kool-Aid thinking that maybe nuclear just does not harm anybody. That's the new push from Forbes magazine. Is the good lesson from Fukushima is that we've learned that radiation just is not that bad. The alarmists are just freaking out over nothing. Problem with radiation is it takes 5 to 20, 30 years for it to show up. And the worst part is the next generation. You get cancer, but your kids will have endocrine problems, will have cancer problems, holes in their heart. They're going to have holes in their heart. A newborn baby being born with a hole in its heart has to have surgery the first 24 hours of its life. And the rest of its life is dramatically changed. We're talking about the quality of life here, folks. And the poor animals in the ocean, they have no defense. They just starve and die. And we're just looking at them saying, gee, I wonder, and we listen to this bullshit I don't know how you guys can take it, but I certainly can't. We're listening to these people say, we have no idea. These people that we're looking to, these people that we're expect to give us some answers, the, quote, scientists. This is like the fucking emperor has no clothes. The fucking emperor has no clothes. For real, the fucking emperor has no clothes. He doesn't even have any fucking shoes on. There's nothing. And they're acting like everything is fine, just fine, except it's that pesky global warming, that pesky fossil fuel. If we could just get rid of the fossil fuel and add more nuclear, we'd be way better off. That is such an outrage. Our elected officials are just grabbing at straws while they're taking in the money. And that's what it's about. They're being bought off to the detriment of their own children. There has been lots and lots and lots of evidence that shows that nuclear radiation, the worst harm that comes, starts at that third generation. So we're not even past the first generation here of Fukushima. And frankly, I can't even believe we have to frame it like this. I cannot believe that the world powers are not freaking out and demanding that we figure out a way to plug those goddamn holes in Fukushima. I mean, they might have put these pretty little plastic buildings around it, but underneath there, guarantee you it's seething a million times worse than anything we've ever seen before. And the propaganda is, oh, TEPCO's doing a great job. They're decommissioning. There is no decommissioning. Those decommissioning is when you close down a nuclear power plant, like San Onofre. That's getting decommissioned. It's going to take 40 years to decommission it. That's the ironic part. They want us to build new nuclear power plants, and they have no idea how to stop them. Like they just expect us to just trust them. That these new tiny little modular antimatter proteins, what are they called? Antiproton units, which they say will produce very extremely low amounts of radiation. We're supposed to just trust them when all they've done is lie about everything. And right now they're trying to slip a bill through Oregon to declare a state of emergency, House Bill 4335, which in Oregon, if anybody hears this, we need to be calling our state representatives and the governor and saying, veto that bill. We do not need nuclear in Oregon. In fact, we don't need nuclear anywhere in our country or on the rest of the planet. You know, in India, people are dying. They're killing anti-nuclear activists. In India, thousands and thousands and thousands of people are putting their bodies on the line to stop nuclear power from being built. And you know what's happening? They're just plowing them down, and they plan on doing it. That's what I mean. It feels like we're pissing in the wind. I guess when they don't give a fuck how many babies they kill, why should we think they'd give a crap about how many adults they kill? But it does not mean that we can't stop trying. We must continue. We must fight back against these people because they are complete murderers and they have no regard for human life or any life on our planet. Nuclear power is the worst thing that has ever happened on our entire history of the earth. As far as known history is concerned, this has been the most catastrophic event that has ever happened. And we are there's hundreds. When I looked at this list on Wikipedia of all these anti-nuclear groups, there must be 60 of them listed. How many people does that engender? They consider the Sierra Club. That fucking is hilarious. The Sierra Club is listed on this list. The Sierra Club is not anti-nuclear. If they were, they'd be organizing to speak out about what's happening to the Pacific Ocean right now. It's unbelievable. Where are these organizations? Where are these people? Why are they not speaking out? That's my question to them. I'm completely blown away. All we have to do is open up today's news, go to the internet and look at the news cycle, and you know what? We get enough ammunition to really talk to them about it. But does it even matter? Do any of them ever do anything about it? We have whales, huge, gigantic whales coming up dead in droves now. One scientist actually said specifically, we are specifically not testing for radiation. Really? Why is that? Because they know what answer they're going to get when they specifically test for radiation. And then what are they going to tell us? The Pacific Ocean is full of radiation, folks. Don't go near it and don't eat the fish. And then what's that going to do to California? It is a catastrophic event. But I don't know how you guys feel, but I want to know the truth. Which brings me into something that I heard on Joel's radio station, before the first cup, Joel's radio show that's on this station. She was talking about how the Googles is going to be controlling what we hear on the news now. They're talking about putting up some algorithms so that they can determine what's news and what's not news. Like radio shows like this are going to be considered not news. I can bring you the news, reading from you from the Hill on these articles about, them being pro-nuclear. I guess that would be considered not news because we're not pro-nuclear. So, this is how civilizations kill themselves, by refusing to be engaged and face the reality. Um, we have so much going on in our country right now on the nuclear agenda. I am just dumbfounded. We do not have many, many, many more organizations speaking out publicly and finding ways to hit the airwaves. Like, why doesn't Beyond Nuclear do a YouTube channel on a regular basis? If they're really anti-nuclear, why don't they hit the masses of people where they're at? I mean, even an organization like Beyond Hanford, you know, up here in the North Pacific Northwest, they do really awesome work about holding the tide down. But people don't hear about it because we are suppressed on the mainstream news. The only way to get it out is through alternative media. And, you know, soon, I think, frankly, soon even the YouTubes will be going away. I mean, I think YouTube is more about counting heads and checking out who's saying what rather than really getting the information out. We're really coming into a catastrophe. We are in a catastrophic time, folks. So I'm so glad that Kevin was able to meet up with some people who actively engaged in stop nuclear power plants over in Austria. And I know that's his intention, is to go over there, pick their brains a bit, and figure out how do they organize, how do they do it. And, you know, from my brief conversations, we haven't had a lot of time to talk between me and Kevin while he's over in Europe. But you know what I think they did? They just did it. They just made the fucking effort. It's not that hard. They just did it. It's like us. We're just doing it. The people listening to this radio show are the ones that are actively engaged. And so, as Carl Grossman said on his radio show, probably he was being interviewed by Helen Caldecott 3 years ago, when I heard him. He said, "We are in a catastrophic time, and we need every person to take action. If you think that you have an idea and you think it might work, take action, because we need everybody's efforts. This is a catastrophic event." And as we see, what's happened is not enough people are actively engaged, so that now we have these fucking people at NOAA telling us it's an algae bloom. Yeah, it's an algae bloom caused by nuclear radiation, you dumb fucks. Like, seriously, they should be warning people, don't eat the salmon. Don't eat the salmon. I mean, eat the salmon if you don't care if you get cancer. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, you might as well. It is a crapshoot. I heard a scientist from Norway, they were asking him, this was shortly after I kind of figured out that we were still in a world of hurt on the radiation thing. I was watching every video, reading every interview, trying to get caught up, because I didn't really discover it until May 5th, 2012. So it was more than a year after the accident that I realized that we fucking got lied to. I honestly, until that night when I had that nightmare, I really believed that them pouring that ocean water on the nuclear power plants actually helped. That's what I thought. That's what they told us. The mainstream media basically said, well, the generators are broken and we have to bring in the hoses and pour the water directly on from the ocean. That's why we build these right next to water, just in case we need it. And I went, wow, what a great idea. And I watched them with the fire trucks, and, you know, I thought, oh, thank God, that could have been really horrible. And went about my business. And then one night I had a nightmare that, guess what? No, that was actually probably the worst thing in the world they could have done. And they not only made it exponentially worse, but they lied. They intentionally lied to the entire planet that this was not going to harm anybody. And here we are now, almost 5 years later, and the poor babies and the poor children and the parents in Japan. I mean, I cannot imagine the emotional strain on the people in Japan, knowing that they intentionally have to put their children in harm's way. These people in Fukushima are being forced to move back to Fukushima with their children, knowing that they are going to put them in harm's way. And I mean, I guess at a certain point, you just, in the back of your head, you go, they've already been infected. I guess it doesn't matter. I honestly could not figure it out. You know, I heard an interview this week from a woman who had gone to Hawaii for vacation. She was part of a group of people who had taken advantage of an offer to go to Hawaii for a vacation to get out of Fukushima. And they said that every person, to a person, got violently ill when they left Fukushima. And the interviewer said, well, maybe it was because they were detoxing. I don't think they were detoxing. I think that they were, vomiting and throwing up and having horrible nosebleeds the week after they left Japan, because they were high up in the air where the radiation is the most extreme, and I think their body's already been exposed to it. But again, because we don't have any scientific testing, there's no doctors, there's no system. It's a crapshoot. My guess is as good as anybody else's. And that's the offense. We have the tools. Our culture has the tools. We have the ability to figure this out. We could figure it out. We could figure out how to mitigate the harm caused by radiation. But you cannot figure out something if you're not willing to acknowledge it. So in the meantime, we have a system set up for complete denial. Complete, utter, 100% denial. In fact, even the victims of radiation are in complete denial. Everybody. My brother fucking got cancer. He lived 100 miles east of the whip. When I told him you got cancer from the fire at the whip about 7 or 8 months earlier, he's like, oh, no. That's because I eat light shit and I smoke cigarettes. I'm like, okay. I mean, people don't ever want to acknowledge that this is how fearful people are about radiation. They don't want to acknowledge they've been affected by it. This is how extreme it is. And we need to move into an era, a post-ignorant era, where we can actually go to the doctor and say, I want to have my blood tested for radiation. I want to know what my levels of cesium-137 are, plutonium, americium. We need to be able to figure this stuff out so that we can figure out how to mitigate it. There has to be reasons, and we can start to look for where it's going to be in our bones, in our heart, in our brains. How is it going to get there? I mean, that was the thing that blew me away about Beau Biden's cancer death. They said that he was fighting brain cancer for the last 2 years. That means that Vice President Joe Biden's son was dying of brain cancer for 2 years now, never once spoke out against the radiation spewing out of Fukushima, never once spoke out about the radiation from cell phones, never once spoke out about the radiation that his son was exposed to when he was in Afghanistan and Iraq. It is as if it just does not affect anything. It's like they can pretend it all away. We can pretend it doesn't affect us. I mean, this is why I keep hammering back to Dr. John Goffman, who I frankly knew nothing about before I got into this. That's how effective the nuclear cartel has been in suppressing information on the negative harm of radiation. It is intentional. It is intentional to make us just give up and go away. And if we all die of radiological diseases and radioactive contamination, but we don't know that we're dying from it, the people who are making money can, they get to die feeling rich and like they've accomplished something. Mission accomplished, man. I mean, Operation Paperclip brought in a lot of the Nazi scientists who discovered all of this. And they took it on Balco. When they came into America, they basically infiltrated our entire country. And our system of doing business in this country has never been the same after World War II. And now we just have to accept the fact that every single elected official is drinking the Kool-Aid on nuclear energy. We have governors trying to roll back laws that people pass so that they could protect themselves. My own in Oregon, listen to this. This was unbelievable. Officials in Oregon considered a bill this year to fund a task force to look into nuclear power. That's HB 4335. Washington already has a nuclear task force, and one of its members, Republican State Senator Sharon Brown, introduced 9 measures to support nuclear energy efforts in the state this session. Well, I guess Washington doesn't really give a fuck because they have Hanford. They bring in, I think it was, $9 billion a year into their state to keep Hanford going. She was able to get components of those bills through the Senate this year, including funding a small nuclear modular reactor study and a nuclear education program. Nuclear education program. They're still alive as lawmakers hash out a final budget plan for this year. She said the education component is needed both to train future nuclear engineers as well as to inform the public about the issue. Inform the public. Anytime they start talking about informing the public, I kind of get nervous about that. We have James Inhofe, who is now, this is the really scary part. I don't know if any of you, James Inhofe was the senator who stood on the floor of the Senate and held a snowball in his hand and said, well, how can we have global warming if I have a snowball here? Which means he can't really think his way out of a paper box. And I think that whole calling it global warming is a misnomer that was intentionally done. We obviously have climate change, and our planet's going through catastrophic changes right now, probably natural and spurred on by unnatural causes like all the pollution. We have basically used this planet for a fucking trash can. And no one's doing the laundry. That's the issue. This is the problem with the nuclear industry. Nobody does the laundry. Nobody cleans up. Nobody figures it out. James Inhofe, he's the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee chairman, may intensify congressional oversight of the NRC. Really? Let's see him do that. Inhofe is concerned that the NRC's new safety standards could be too burdensome. Can you believe that, fucking folks? The new safety standards are too burdensome. This year, the GOP senator has held hearings on the agency's expanding budget and workload. Well, expanding budget and workload, they just fired 178 people. What the hell does that mean? For now, though, most of the nation's policy making is happening in the states. It is colloquial, and it's true. It's all and that all politics are local. It's definitely going to be a state-led effort. The conversation has shifted to the state perspective, and we need to make sure that federal policymakers still have a handle on what's going on in the states. So this is the thing, guys. It really is at a state level, and we really do have to watch what they're going to do. We have to read the legislation. You can get the legislative summaries from the webpage in your states to read what is being considered. It is extremely important that we have small local activists. When I saw this page of all these guys that have been working on nuclear, all these so-called anti-nuclear groups, although I think this is hilarious. Maybe I'll go in there and modify this on the Wikipedia because the Sierra Club is certainly not anti-nuclear. If they were anti-nuclear, they would have done something. They have enough money. That's a big fucking organization. I don't know. Anyways, we have 15 minutes left on this show just about, and I definitely want to talk a little bit about Kevin's journey throughout Europe. He is planning on heading out of Austria. He will be going to I don't think he's going to go to Belarus. I think they've talked him out of that one, but he's going to head into Poland. He's going to go into Germany. I know he's really making some connections to meet with some anti-nuclear groups there. And he definitely needs your support. If you could go to the postignoranceproject.com, www.thepostignoranceproject.com, hit the donate button. Any money that you give us really helps tremendously. We also have a GoFundMe page, and you can see that that button is also linked on our Post Ignorance Project page. So anything that you can do, Kevin's going to be in Europe until September 10th, so he is not going to be back for quite a while. I plan on, this is going to be how I'm going to be doing the radio show, this, and hopefully it'll work out, and I think it will. There's plenty of people to talk to. My idea is that on Tuesdays I'll be doing the radio show, and on Thursdays I'll be conducting an interview. So, and hopefully I want to get Shane Russell on, and I don't know if many of you know who Shane Russell is, but he's the man who got all the FOIA documents, the Freedom of Information documents about what happened the first, I guess, 2 weeks of after Fukushima, after 3/11. And he's been deciphering it. He is I hate to say what a mill worker. I don't know. He's a science guy, and he understands all that stuff. He basically is the person who puts the blueprint plans and makes them work. He works with people he oversees projects. So he helps people build like the steel and all that stuff. He works on industrial sites. So he can speak the science language, which, as you can tell by my introduction, I certainly don't. So I can't wait to talk to Shane. Unfortunately, he is not available during this hour, so we're going to have to do some interviews with him, recorded, and then just play them. So, but I'm hoping that I can do 2 or 3 of them, because the FOIA documents are quite a lot of documents. There's a lot of information that was really out in public view about how much they knew. And in fact, that's kind of the dirty little secret that's coming out about all of it, is they have known about it. And it's a matter of, do you want to pay attention? It's like our elected officials now are saying it's at a state level. Building nuclear power plants is at a state level. Inhofe is saying that the regulations are too strict, too burdensome. Really? Fukushima's been going on for 4 years. Unfortunately, you see, it's not like a nuclear bomb where you have 500,000 people just instantly disappear. The way that people disappear when you have a nuclear meltdown is that they disappear in the agony of their own homes. They go to the hospitals and they wither away. Anybody that saw that documentary, I think it was called A2D2 or A1A2 or something like that, about the man who went to Fukushima and interviewed all the people over there about the thyroid nodes. That's why they call them, because you have these you get thyroid nodes. And in Belarus, they actually removed the nodes from the children and followed them for several years. And the children still got cancer, but dramatically less. In Fukushima, what they're doing is they're logging in the thyroid nodes, they're tracking them, and the children get seen once a year. So they're waiting to take them out, and they're waiting to take out their thyroids until they actually get cancer. So they're going to treat the children after they get cancer, and the likelihood of them dying of cancer exponentially increases, which means that by the time they grow up, they won't be able to have children. And, it's if they grow up at all. These little boys in the documentary looked up at Ian and said, what do you know about radiation? They said, it's going to kill us. We're going to get cancer and die early. Now, these were 8 or 9-year-old little kids giggling out of embarrassment that they know they're going to die of radiation cancer. It's unbelievable. So Kevin's over in Europe. I guess we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall trying to figure out what sticks. That's That's why we do this radio show. That's why we do the protests. I'm personally going to go protest tomorrow on the corner of River Road in the Beltline. And I'm going to do it about 5:30, 6 o'clock when people are coming off of work. And I'm going to hold up a protest sign and encourage people to call our state Senate to stop House Bill 3445. I mean, personally, I don't want a state of emergency declared in Oregon. That would dramatically change things. And I don't think we need these little tiny nuclear modular plants anywhere in Oregon. And frankly, I think the conversation about simplifying our lives, we do not need 24 hours of electricity. I mean, there's a lot of things that we could do differently on our planet if we allowed ourselves to do them. So, the idea that we may not have all the electricity we need is not such an offensive thing. I mean, ironically, I don't know how many of you have noticed, but since the net neutrality rules, the internet is way slower in the United States. Loading up is way slower. We are not getting what we pay for. They're punishing us for one of these net neutrality laws. That's what I think. And I think it's going to get a lot worse. And I have heard that we have had these unprecedented, I don't know what you call them, sun flares. So we can be looking for big, gigantic earthquakes in the next week or so, I guess. So who knows what's going to happen? Who knows if by the time I talk to you guys next week, we end up having a big, gigantic earthquake. Fukushima doesn't break the whole entire fucking island of Japan in half and set off Mount Fuji. That's all a real strong possibility. Real strong possibility. Then we can watch all the nuclear scientists pee in their pants because they don't know how to fucking admit the truth. That's the bullshit about it. I don't know. So anyways, if anybody wants to get in touch with me, you can call me. Get in touch with me through my email at thepostignoranceproject@gmail.com. If you have any good ideas or any networking ideas, or if there's anybody you'd like to see me interview while Kevin's gone, please send me an email. If you have any comments about the radio show, I'd like to hear that. Obviously, you can tell I'm not a professional radio host, but I'm doing the best that I can. It is really up to us. And this is what the Post-Ignorance Project is about. We must move into being post-ignorant. We must move into being able to accept the responsibility for living on this planet and to stop these nuclear murderers. These people there's only a handful of people who have this control. And if we can get to scientists like that lady, what was her name earlier? Vera Trainer. Vera Trainer's phone number, by the way, folks, at the NOAA, NOAA, is 206-860-6788. And if you can call her and tell her we want to see the testing for nuclear radiation, we want to know what's going on in the water, we want to understand why this algae bloom is like this, instead of them just handing us the "we don't know what happened" routine, we do know what happened, and it's called Fukushima. Fukushima is not only here, but it is taking over like Godzilla the entire fucking planet. Maybe the only thing that could compete with Fukushima is those big, gigantic plumes of trash swirling around in the oceans. Because not only is it now Trashlandia, as it's been called by the UN, but it also is full of nuclear radiation. So who the hell knows what's going to come out of that? I mean, honestly, this last generation, you know what it speaks to? You know how we got a big island size of trash floating around in the Pacific Ocean? It's exactly the same thing that kept me from realizing that San Onofre was a nuclear power plant on the coast where there are earthquakes for most of my life. Because it's all been, the propaganda war was won after World War II. Mission accomplished. When Bush said mission accomplished, he fucking meant it. He did the job. He came in and tidied up all the details. So that now when we have Fukushima happening on our planet, we don't get any of the truth. Fox News, MSNBC, I guess those are the only two. There's really only two. CBS News is inconsequential. CBS News does actually report a little bit, but they don't have a network news, and we don't hear about it, and they do not talk about it. They give us these, I don't know, what I consider to be false flag events where they pump up some kid with drugs, hand him a gun, and ask him to go, encourage him to go blow the fuck out of somebody and change the conversation so that we don't see what's going on. That's the outrageous part. It's the shiny ball theory. That's what I call it. It's the shiny ball theory. They take our attention to one horrific event to keep us off of another horrific event that's going to affect millions more people. This thing with it's been going on in Europe. We just had the Bilderberg. We had the G7. I guess it's the G7. They kicked Russia out because they want to start a nuclear war with Russia. And, we had the Spent Fuel Conference. And so are we going to hear about what happened with the Spent Fuel Conference? Not likely, because guess what? We're on a need-to-know basis, and we don't need to know. I guess that's their attitude, right? We don't need to know. Just be grateful that we have our little crumbs. I don't know if any of you have ever read Dickens, but people need to read Dickens all over again because the times of Dickens are returning. It has returned. That wealth inequity is worse now than it ever was. And it's up to us to make a change. It's up to us to make a difference. We're the only ones. We are the only people that can save ourselves. And like I said in the beginning of this hour, we have two choices. We can choose to be cowards, or we can choose to not be cowards. We can choose to have some courage and face the hard facts and the hard truths. Come out of the caves and try to start figuring out how to light the cave and warm ourselves up. It's like I told Kevin one time, if it was up to the general massive population, we'd be sitting in the caves in the fucking dark, eating berries during the day. I mean, really, seriously, it's up to us to have our courage, folks. So I'll be back on Thursday. I'll be interviewing Patrick McCormick. I think he's written some poetry. Hopefully he'll be able to read some of his poetry. I don't think it's related to Fukushima. He does try to make it inspirational, I think. That's what I recall him telling me. So I'll be interviewing Patrick McCormick. He's working with Thomas Ackerman to get the free radical shows going. And so we'll be moving forward on that. And as we progress through the summer, hopefully I'll be able to interview Ackerman again. I want to get Shane Russell on the air. I'd love to interview Miss Milky the Clown. If you're listening, Miss Milky, please say yes when I ask you. And I'd really love to get Rad Chick. There are some really great activists out there that we could interview, and I think it would really help maybe move the cause along. So I'm going to be doing some efforts on that one. Please, when we end this program, please contact your elected officials in your state and tell them no to these little tiny nuclear modules. We do not need nuclear energy at all. It is not safe. It is not clean. That's a false equivalency, and they need to hear from their constituents. And even if they're going to ignore us, at least we'll be that little ping in the back of their head, letting them know that we're out here and we refuse to be pushed around and have our children murdered by the nuclear cartel. Not one more generation of murdered children by the nuclear cartel. No. And it's time for us to stand up against them. I don't know where all these other activist groups are and why we don't hear about them and why we're not listening to people on the news, on the alternative radios, on the YouTubes. It's beyond me. It's really beyond me. That's, in fact, going to be part of my big... I'm going to be doing some research on that. So we'll talk to you again on Thursday. UCY Radio, thank you so much for the opportunity. And we'll talk to you again. Put your courage feet on, because we definitely need them. Walk in integrity. Bye, you guys. I'll talk to you next week. 2 more days from now, on Thursday.
nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. All nuclear fighters, all hands on deck, all hands on deck, all hands on deck. They'll be calling you a radical. Bloomgate, 311, whatever you want to call it.